y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations.
Folks, we're here today to talk about advocacy. I know this is a very hot topic, and I have my good friend Mark Tolan here. He is the lead for the Advocacy Committee for VRNation. So I'm going to let Mark talk, and I'm going to listen because there are a lot of topics I think a lot of you as listeners are really interested in checking out, and there's a lot of great information that Mark's been working on. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
You want to introduce yourself to the folks and talk a little bit about your company?
Yeah, Mark Tolan, second generation vacation rentals. Business started in 1983. I became an owner-operator in 2008. So been in it for a while in an established market, Seaside, Oregon, which is essentially the Coney Island of the Pacific Northwest.
Yes,
Bumper cars, boardwalk, helicopter rides, come visit. And in turn, even though it's an established market, and had pretty significant regulation, we found ourselves in the fight for sustainability during COVID and coming out of COVID. So kind of thrust upon me to learn by fire, and now working on making our overall fight as an organization more sustainable. So.
Oh, great. And I'm happy to have you here. So obviously, as folks who've been following, you know that I work with Cabino and we're out of Idaho. And I do know that there are some folks in Idaho, especially in Coeur d'Alene, that are going through the same battle currently. And they are having to fight and advocate for themselves. And even though Idaho has some pretty protective laws at the state level, each municipality is finding ways around that. So maybe you can talk at a high level, like what you see as positives in the battle that we're fighting, and then maybe what potentially the future is looking like.
Sure. So we did a gap analysis, and if you're not familiar with what that looks like, it's to go through an organization and say what's working and what's not, and where is there a middle ground where we need to fill that gap to make the whole program more cohesive. And so when we think about advocacy in general, we haven't had much in the way of top-down leadership from the federal level to say what property rights are. They've left it up to the states. Okay, so now at the state level, do we have leadership? No. It's been every little market on its own saying what is a homeowner's right. And the concept of an ability to rent a property long-term fits in the mold of everybody has the inherent right to do that outside of an HOA. Yet when we move into hospitality, there is a sense of the unknown and consumer protection. So conceptually, they are the idea of like, well, if you live in it full time, you know that stair is a little short, or that landing is slanted.
Right.
But you're there full time, you're aware of it. If you're brand new to the property and you're coming in at night and it's dark, that becomes a liability.
Right.
So applying commercial standards to residential properties because of this short-term use is where the idea of challenges comes in to say municipalities feel a need to protect and regulate from a public safety standpoint. And that's reasonable. It's a reasonable concept, and yet how do we also balance that with a homeowner's ability to do what they want with their property from a long-term rental, saying, well, is there really a big difference between 31 days and 29 days, or 27 or 14? And now, knowing that this is not going to go away, and knowing we're going to have a patchwork, where do we see our biggest ROI from an organizational spend and an organizational collaboration methodology? So moving from a regional organization to now a national organization, it was pretty easy to kind of keep track of what's happening in our backyard. And it was amongst our board, we were like, oh yeah, this is what's going on in Idaho, this is what's going on in Oregon. Right. And we could kind of keep each other apprised to what we're doing and how we're helping local resources when we could with the playbook. Now, thinking about, well, how do we do this at a greater level? Which you can expect from us as from a leadership standpoint is saying, well, what does it look like when we tear down to make not just what we're doing at the high level, also reproduced in smaller regions, right?
So you're really building a playbook that, so I could have Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on one hand, and I could have Stratton, Vermont on another hand, and the playbook is really for people who are property managers to understand what the levers look like at the local, at the municipality, the state, potentially at the federal level, and how to get into that fight.
Right. Yeah. In organizing and getting tools to say, like, this is what's worked in the past. We've been able to network, talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to me. I'll be happy to tell you about what worked in Seaside. But more so in the preventative and sustainability, the idea of having local chapters of advocacy groups. How do we support existing advocacy groups? How do we network and make sure that things are more sustainable is what we're spending time on developing, to say, well, we don't want to control what's happening at the local level. We want to help facilitate and be a resource to that.
Gotcha.
So that's what we're spending a lot of time thinking about and planning to say, as we look at organizing not just homeowners, but also property managers, what does that look like from a mission statement, a support system, and a resource allocation from our organization?
Gotcha.
So as I said, it's been kind of a matter of like, okay, well, where's the money going to come from? Where's the money going to go?
Right.
What creates the biggest impact? Well, the biggest impact is at the local level, organizing the local level, making it more sustainable. If we can do those things, we're going to have the biggest impact. And that's where our gap analysis landed, is to say there are some big markets where they're already organized, they're consistent. But the big markets don't make the majority of our industry.
Right.
It's small rural
areas.
Where we need to be able to collaborate both with the DIY homeowners who have potentially a lot more time than the property managers to carry out and be involved. When we say carry it out and be involved, what does that look like? And how do we help? How do we help create a rising tide to say, yeah, this is what's working in this market and it's applicable in all these other markets. So let's provide those resources and let's help with the communication and the accessibility. So what does that mean? That means, does your local group have a website? Do they have an email campaign? Do you have a branding initiative? Do you have coffee dates and specific agenda items that you're looking to get in front of your local legislatures?
Right.
Do you have any kind of like productivity report to say, our local alliance wants to just give a productivity report, like, this year we produced this many total reservations that create this much economic impact, and we're really excited to say we're going to make a donation to this group from our local chapter. Like, that's really fantastic, getting ahead of the problem that we're not as an industry facilitating right now, because realistically we all have businesses to run, and yet this is going to be a vital part of our sustainability long term. So that's what we're working on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when I hear that, I'm thinking political action committee or something along those lines. I mean, is that really what we're talking about? Once you get your ducks in a row, so to speak, and you're starting to set up coffee dates, is it really kind of like a political action or a PAC that you're reaching out to, or is it specifically like a local representative or a state senator, or you know what I'm trying to ask, I guess? Because I get a lot of questions to me about funding, right? I mean, a lot of people are really juiced about, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fight these guys. I'm going to organize people. And you kind of watch them floundering, not because of any reason other than they're having to learn the same things that you've already learned.
Yeah.
And then they're saying, well, we need your support. Cut us a check. And you're like, well, you guys had a lot of homework ahead of you before people should be giving you money.
So, one of the key things that we want to take away when we think about any type of reciprocity in relationships is the person doing the asking is oftentimes more important than the question. Right? So when we bring Airbnb into the room and say, vacation rentals should have rights, they don't want to hear from Airbnb. That's not the voice they want to hear. They want to hear somebody this is my family house.
This is my
livelihood. Been in my It's been our family generation for 100 years. We're third generation. We're doing our best to kind of keep it in the family. We don't live here. We love, I'll just use Seaside as an example, but maybe it's Coeur d'Alene, maybe it's Mount Hood. Wherever it is that we're saying this is why, from a family and a roots and a connectivity with the community, my voice matters, then that conversation, that buys us political capital to be in the mind of, no, vacation rentals are not all bad. They serve a purpose.
Right.
And they serve multiple purposes in the marketplace, also not just from the concept of, bringing people in to buy more t-shirts and hamburgers and trinkets, but vacation rental managers are less likely to use DIY methods to get things done. We're more likely to line up the contractors and the electricians, not during the peak season, during the off season. Right? So when we have the ability to say, not only schedule a coffee date, but bring in our local plumber and have him at the table too, he's just like, yeah, I just want you to know, like, vacation rentals is a big part of how I feed my family.
Yeah.
They can't unfeel that. They can't unsee that to make that connection, to be like, yeah, a lot of people come to town and work on their second home. Seaside Vacation Homes make sure that the work gets done right, licensed, bonded, insured. It protects our community, feeds my family. That kind of connections is what we're looking to kind of facilitate more long-term from a preventative standpoint, but we can only do that if we really organize those people who can have those conversations in a way in which it's happening not just from the same person, but different people, right?
Yeah, you really hit on a point, and the one thing that jumped out at me in what you just said is how you make them feel. And I think that's something that people need to understand, because I've sat through so many town meetings. I've sat, or for various reasons, and it's the squeaky wheel. Right? And people, everybody gets annoyed by the squeaky wheel. Like, oh my God, here comes this guy. He's just going to come in and lose his stuff. And he's just, But the reality is that the impression that person is leaving is, panic, is emotion, but that's the feel, right? And it gets those council members, it gets those board members starting to go, wow, this guy's really passionate about this. So they start to tune in, and I think that's important for people to understand, because you're right. Airbnb walks in, it's a company. Little towns are automatically against. They don't want to talk to a big corporation. Yeah. They want to talk to Mark. They want to know, well, Mark, how do you feel about this? And if you're up and you're passionate, just like Joe, who's screaming, I don't want short-term rentals, the conversation right there in front of those people is king. It's very important, and those are the kind of things that I think are good guidelines for. Like I think about my township, right? I live in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, believe it or not, has pretty restrictive guidelines on short-term rentals, which the life of me, I can't figure out why, other than they just like to create laws, right? But if you go and you actually take a level-headed stance and you show emotion and you explain how the value it brings to the area and what you can do, I think you're absolutely right. You're going to get those people feeling the same way.
I mean, it's very easy to have the entitlement conversation. I'm entitled to do this. I have rights. Right. I deserve fairness. More times than not, what we need to do from a playbook standpoint is listen. And what we've listened to from a board level is, where do we see the gap in regards to what people need, and then how do we deliver that more sustainably, right? Because we can throw resources at a fight. Like, real quick, okay, we can come in, network, collaborate, get you a presentation, point towards these things that you're going to want to do at City Hall. But that doesn't fix the problem long term.
Right.
This is not a sprint. There's not a finish line. This is like a lifelong mission to say we're always on the chopping block, because we don't have the top-down clarity that this is an inherent right, like a mineral right or a water right. Like, we don't have that yet in most municipalities.
Okay.
What we have is use conditions.
Yeah, conditional use.
And we have a little bit of zoning variance and ways in which they've said, well, this kind of applies, but we haven't actually put it in stone to say, yes, like, if you do this, it'll be sustainable for you. So that's what we're looking to do, and we're pretty excited about it. I mean, we're just now, as I said, going regional to national at a place where we know who we are, we know where we're going, and we're putting in the dominoes to start to fall to get us there. So,
Excellent. So this is obviously, so advocacy is something like we could sit and chat forever.
Yes.
Because I'm just like.
Well, as I said, and then we're in a place right now where, like, do we have deliverables? We're really close. We've as I said, we've been pivoting to go, okay, we know who we are, we know where we're going. now we're getting to work. So
Awesome.
You should expect big things by next conference. We should have big things to say. This is what our association is doing for our members to move advocacy forward in regards to setting standards on what we want to see other organizations mimic.
Gotcha.
At a city, county, state level, let's all try to see if we can move the pendulum forward.
I think that's terrific. I think that's terrific. And I'd love to bring you back on the podcast as we move forward. It would be awesome just to get updates on it. So real quick, before we wrap, I think one of the things you had said is that there's deliverables coming. What might be an example of a deliverable that a member with VRNation could expect? Would it just be a literal playbook? Like here's the manual on fighting?
So like one of the things we always, like if we look at, like, do one thing and do it better than everybody else.
Right.
We have some amazing, incredibly talented vendors that are offering to overlay their skill sets from an advisory and a collaboration standpoint. We're going to be leaning on those vendors to help us with messaging, help us with how we're doing our deliverables, to get organizations dialed in so we actually look like we know what we're doing, right? Because if you can't play, at least look good while you're trying, right? So if we are getting a group organized early on, how do we help them look, legit to increase the buy-in while the fight's hot, right? Because when we know legislation happens, it tends to catch us a couple weeks, too late, and we have a couple, just a little bit of time to get in there and get organized. So our goal is to try to create fast deliverables for our members who get in a spot to say, like, we got your back, here's what we can get, and here's the timeline we can get it to you, in a way in which we're providing benefit more so than if they would be DIY.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It's like, hey, you could go and do this yourself, but we're going to give you templates, we're going to give you resources to get in the fight quicker so that you can spend more time doing what you do best, which is work on your local communications and resources of networking, right? Because it's going to be a matter of getting with your vendors, your plumbers, your electricians, your carpenters, your carpet cleaners, your landscapers. You're going to need to spend time getting those people at the table and on your team. And then the homeowners that are DIYing it on VRBO and knowing that they've got just as much vested interest and they also have a voice and a story to tell that's going to help win the game.
Right. Excellent. Well, I think that's great. So, ultimately, I'm looking forward to what's going to be coming out of the Advocacy Committee. I'd love to get you back on. Whoever else would be helpful. It would be really great. I know we have a lot of people out there that are just locked in on advocacy because it's their livelihood.
Yeah. Well, we've got a year of dreaming. Now we have a year of getting to work. So, as I said, we've looked at how we're going to make an impact. Now it's time to make it happen. So, as I said, we're looking really looking at 2026 conference to be like, guys, here's what we're doing. This is how we're doing it, and we'll have some proof of concepts.
Well, it looks like we know what the topic for next year's conference is.
Yeah, I'm on record now. I'm in trouble.
You're on record.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining me today. Folks, again, if you like what the conversation is, subscribe, follow us. And if you're interested in having a conversation with Mark, who's on our board for VRNation, please just reach out and we will get you in contact, and then you can bring what you have to the table. And if you'd like to help out, we'd love to have more volunteers. So thanks for joining us again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Welcome y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation. VRNation Station, tune in and feel the thrill.